we know how to find assets for our Figma file, but let's go through how to edit. So for example, I have copied the SVG from Phosphor Icons. You can see it's now a really big sized icon. I can make it smaller. If I do so, then all of the vector shapes that I have used might have had a bigger stroke. You can see in here it's really big at 12. You can set it at something else that's going to work better for your design. And then another thing to keep in mind with a lot of icons, when you're adding them, they might have this kind of empty vector shape just to create the right side frame, but you don't need it in Figma, so feel free to erase that part. And as I've said, with a lot of icons, I do like to just kind of flatten all of the shapes so it's one icon, and if I ever have to recolor it, it's really easy to do so because just one color changes. You're gonna see this again in the components lesson when we're gonna go over all of the icons as variants of different components. So you're gonna see how if there's more than one vector in a frame, how negatively it can impact your designs later on. And it's a preference. It doesn't have to be, again, the flattened shape with a stroke. You can also create it so it's a fill by outlining the stroke. So now it became a shape. As you can see, everything's a shape. You no longer have the control of the stroke, so you can switch it from 1 to 3, for example. But when you're scaling this, you're actually scaling it proportionally. Okay, so that's what happens if you copy an SVG from your browser. But what happens if I have some things in here that I just want to drag into my file? So with photos, you can just easily drag them in like this, and you're gonna have your photo in size. You can control it then through here and do whatever you need to with it. When it comes to icons, you can also drag them just in here like that. Always do try to check if there's some weird subpixels that sometimes happen. In here, you're gonna have a shape like this. Sometimes when it comes to these shapes, Figma kind of creates some weird things. In here, it rendered normally, so perfect, we're good to go. But as you've seen in the icon lesson, sometimes it requires you to kind of go in, touch a spot or two, and remove a line or two that's been created. Now, finally, when we move from photos and icons to illustrations, as you know, there's a ton of places where you can find illustrations online. Most of them are going to be in a format that you can add to Figma, but if it's an EPS file or an AI file, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do so just by dragging it into Figma. And in here, I've opened the illustration I just shown in the last video in Adobe Illustrator. And if we drag it inside, you can actually see that everything is a vector shape. So that's perfect. There's some gradients in here. Everything's working really well. If I erase this, I have a lot of this. Sometimes it's going to have a lot of different groups that you're going to have to go over and kind of figure out how it's organized and working. But for example, if you dig in enough, you're going to be able to grab the icon or illustration that you wanted. Some of them are not like rendering 100% perfectly, but you can go in and figure out what changes are needed, if any. So you can see that if you're converting directly in Adobe Illustrator, you're most likely going to get a really solid export out of it that you can easily use. But if you're using an online converter, sometimes it's just gonna create a couple of these groups, and in the end you're gonna have an image. So it's gonna take you a couple of tries to actually get to a point where you find either a really solid free tool, a paid tool you can use, and even then, sometimes depending on who did this illustration and what the process they followed, it might not look perfectly. So something to keep in mind. Again, you might not use illustrations at all in a lot of your projects, so don't worry about it too much. Finally, when it comes to adding items into Figma, I want to show you one more thing. I grabbed a couple of photos on Unsplash, and if I drag them in here like this, they're going to be added one next to the other based on the order of the photos in here. But you might have a screen like this. Let's say, well, this is a really massive screen. I'm gonna make this a lot smaller. You might have a screen like this, and you have, for example, a list of avatars you want to add or something on the screen. I'm just gonna quickly mock this up. So yeah, let's say you have like a list of items on the screen. Everything else on the screen we're just gonna ignore because it's not the topic of this video. But what you can do is you can go into file in here and place image, or you can use the shortcut depending on, like, if you're on Windows or Mac it might be different, but basically on Mac it's Command Shift K, and it's gonna, well, oh, I wasn't in Figma, so it was not opening up the shortcut as expected. But yeah, as you can see, it opens up this little model for me. I can select all of the images that I want to use in this design and just hit open. And if I do so, I can tap in here and place it just in the place where I tapped, or I can go over some of these frames or rectangles or shapes or whatever and just kind of continuously tap to place images, which is a really nice lifesaver if you want to use specific images in a specific order. When it comes to the order, you're gonna notice that it went from like the last image to the first one, so keep it in mind. That's how it's gonna work. So if this is your last image on the list, it's actually going to be the first one in here. And one other thing is there are, of course, plugins that you can use. So you can always use Unsplash from here, and you can add animals into these. But that might take a little bit more work, or the images might not be the specific one, and you're going to have to kind of randomize those orders, like you might do with a content reel plugin, where you have the ability to go inside, okay, image, and let's say avatars, and apply all. So now it added different avatars to my design, but maybe they're not in the order I wanted. Again, depending on what you need, you might use one method or the other, but just keep in mind that you can do this to fill up your design with realistic content.